This is the Daily Tech News Show for Friday, December 27th, 2024 in Los Angeles. I'm Tom Merritt. 2024, man. You know, there were some big news stories. There were even big tech news stories. So we are looking at the headlines for DTNS and Good Day Internet, from the rise of generative models to the increased scrutiny of social media governments around the world, and much, much more. Our producer, Joe, has put together the best conversations we've had all year, assembled gratefully to you for supporting the show. Let's take a look.
Tom, you may open the ledger.
Open the ledger.
It just ends up being our accounting.
Yeah, it's just real boring.
It's just tax records.
It says product guarantee. Ready Form is committed to providing you with quality. Oh, that's probably not the part.
Probably not.
Oh, that's so cool. There's like Willie Scott right off the top, and lots of people. It's like signing my yearbook.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
it's hard to see just because the pages are white, but yeah, it's like a guest book kind of looking thing. Mm-hmm.
If I had autofocus, I could.
This was an idea that I got from someone in Diamond Club a long time ago, and I enacted it with BioCal's help, and then with Joe's help, and then with Roger's help, and with
Patrick Cohn signed it.
TJ, yeah. So that is something that as you go throughout your year this year, I would like you to take that with you so that more people have an opportunity to congratulate you and thank you for 10 years of Daily Tech News Show.
Squishy started a top 5 reasons that TM is awesome and did number 1 and left a blank for other people. So that's perfect. Wow. This just keeps going. BioCal is in here. Mitsula's in here. Claire Gack is in here. The Jen, I have to mail your badge back. I promise I will. Robe Tess, Natalie Sargent. Oh, it just keeps going.
Yeah, goes on and on, man.
KT Data.
Yeah.
TV's Travis. I see you, Theater Monkey, signing in the middle of a bunch of blank pages, so I had to search through. Mm-hmm.
I might have done that too.
Mm-hmm. So did Lamar Wilson. Mm-hmm.
I just said, wherever it opens, that's my page.
And then Brian Brushwood did too. Gotcha, another page. This is great. Thank you, guys.
Very cool.
That's so cool. Yes, I will make sure. I will take this to CES. I will take it to the Brushwood Estate the next time I go in April. I'll take it to the TMS Vegas. I'll make sure it's on me at all times.
Sweet.
That's so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for doing that.
Well, it was crowd effort. Crowd effort?
I'm just awkward silence with the applause button.
We crowdsourced group effort.
An AI George Carlin is doing a comedy special which may not be as bad as you think. Or maybe it is as bad as you think. Kind of depends on who you ask. The Dudesy channel has published a 1-hour-long comedy special called George Carlin, I'm Glad I'm Dead. At the beginning of the special, the Dudesy voice says, I just want to let you know very clearly that what you're about to hear is not George Carlin. It's my impersonation of George Carlin that I developed in the exact way a human impressionist would. Carlin's daughter, Kelly Carlin, however, doesn't buy it. She's like, writing on X, she wrote, these AI-generated products are clever attempts at trying to recreate a mind that will never exist again. Let's let the artist's work speak for itself. Humans are so afraid of the void that we can't let what has fallen into it stay there. I don't know. I have some complex thoughts about this. What do you think, Rob?
There are a lot of folks who don't like, even when human impersonators do good impersonations of them, they don't like that. No, you got this wrong, you got that wrong. There's a lot of folks who don't like that. Mm-hmm. But when but at least like there's a comedian, Godfrey. To me, he's dead on with so many of his impersonations. Mm-hmm. That is an art form that he's actually doing. He's got a skill, he's got a talent to where he has actually trained himself to be able to do this as a person. It seems to me like all AI eventually would be able to do this almost perfectly, which there's no art in it. Maybe there was art in the code of creating the AI that could do it, but there's no art in the actual interpretation from a generative AI and creating, George Carlin. So I can see why his daughter would be so upset, because George Carlin is not here to talk about how bad this impersonation was or how great it was, however he felt about it.
The title is Wherever You Get Your Podcasts is a Radical Statement. That's that thing at the end of podcast where people say, find us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And then Neil
you hear
points
that
out
everywhere.
Yeah.
He points out that, like, what other platform is like that? Podcasts are unique in continuing to be an open ecosystem that no one has locked up, so that big podcasts, Joe Rogan being one of the few exceptions, but big podcasts from NPR, the BBC, The Economist are available across platform just by default.
It's the one piece of this that I love the most. It's the reason I got into it in the first place. There's a democracy to it, the ability for anybody with a microphone and a computer or some way of posting MP3s to make something and put it in places where people can get it and get it actively without subscriptions. There have been efforts, Spotify's one of them, efforts to close in some stuff, make it harder for it to be out in other places. But for the most part, it's the one medium that sort of stayed, like you think of YouTube. You can't just say, well, forget my video wherever you get videos. No one says that.
The final line of this Anil Dash article, I think, is really provocative. He says, in this era where we're seeing the renaissance of the open web, they point the way toward a future where we could use the same tone to say, wherever you find your news or wherever you find your friends online, and know that it means that there's a way that our lives online could be fully in our own control.
New York City has filed a lawsuit against social media companies TikTok, Meta, and Snap, as well as Google's YouTube. It alleges that the companies intentionally manipulate and addict younger users, keeping them on their platforms.
It matters a little bit more in that New York City has more of a way that they can squeeze some of these companies. But in terms of government going after social media, no, this is the new normal.
Social media is a crazy place for everybody, but it is especially bad for people whose brains are still developing. There are study after study that is showing, and I don't want to say that the science is conclusive, but they're showing that these social media platforms are adversely affecting, children and teenagers in a multitude of ways. You've got politicians who are saying, well, something should be done, but they're not passing laws. And you have social media companies who are saying, well, we're adhering to the laws as they are. What do you want us to do?
There's a brand new game called Balaltro, which sold over 1 million copies on Steam. It's a kind of a deck builder card game based on poker cards. Long and the short of it is this one developer just killed it with this thing. Well, people like him and small teams like him are going to benefit from tools that let them do more in less time because they have limited resources. It's how it scales where the concerns are. Like, I think these things are great for small teams. I think where it starts to scale up to your big studios with 200 people working on the next Call of Duty, a lot of these companies go, well, what if this was 50 people working on the next Call of Duty and we got rid of 150 of these people and then we've saved our whole budget, and even if we sold half the amount of copies, we'd still prepare.
Technology comes along. Yeah. That means you need fewer people in order to make a broadcast television show, a live broadcast television show. To do exactly what we're doing right now on YouTube and Twitch 30 years ago, took a staff of at least 20, Roger, Easy. Would you say? Like,
12,
all told,
12 people.
Maybe 12. Okay, 12's fair, but you're going to need people doing switching. You're going to need people who can maintain satellite equipment. You're going to need multiple camera operators. And so you could look at that and say, oh, well, the advent of live streaming technology threw a bunch of people out of work in television. And you wouldn't be wrong. It has. But it has also created the ability for us to do this job in a way we wouldn't be able to.
We are going to be affected by AI tools. Game developers are. Guy working on your car doing diagnostics and solutions for what's wrong with your carburetor, he's going to get tools. Like, it's going to be, everybody is going to get touched by this in some way. with very few exceptions that I can think of. If you really want to have some fun, go back and do a little bit of history about 93, 94, all right? And understand just how seismic the arrival of the internet was to every aspect of our lives. We look at it now and we go, wow, it's all good now. We got everything we need and everything's wondering, it's all running the way we need it to. And it's all fast and amazing and everything. But back then it felt so threatening to some people. So it just felt so much like, oh my gosh, what's this going to do to mail? What's this going to do to accounting? What's this going to do to a million businesses and careers and everything else? But we didn't know. So there's a lot of unknown. And I guarantee in 20 years, we're going to look at it and go, oh, well, we didn't know this.
Yeah. We thought this was going to be the thing, and we were so wrong.
23andMe said that users negligently recycled and failed to update their passwords following these past security incidents, which are unrelated to 23andMe. So are they trying to go out of business?
It's their site. They have to maintain a standard of security. If they were allowing a standard of security that was insecure, then that ultimately is their fault.
There was only like 10, 12,000 people who actually got hacked. Because of those people got hacked, their files became available, and that's where the 6.9 million folks was accessed.
23andMe could have said, you need a YubiKey. You need 2 YubiKeys at the same time. I don't care if you have 2 USB ports. You need to also have a notarized piece of paper that you scan in and a human double checks to access your account. They could have done that if they wanted. Why didn't they? Because that'd be onerous on the user experience. They gambled, they lost, and they need to own up to it.
Well, a survey released at Davos found that 75% of chief executives do not see generative models leading to a headcount reduction. That's not the headline you're seeing. The headline you're seeing is that 25% do. Of those who do, they expect the reduction to be about 5% of staff. Yeah. Most of the CEOs who said they expected reduction were in the media and entertainment, banking, in insurance and logistics industries. 46% said that staff reduction or not, they expect generative models to increase profitability. There was the computer revolution, which, automated a lot, but really just shifted people's jobs. We shifted into being able to have program managers and product managers and things like that. Yeah. There was also the Industrial Revolution, which got rid of people's jobs, and then they didn't have a job. And so they rioted and sabotaged industry and stuff. I think this is somewhere in between. 5% is significant, but it's not huge.
I don't want to sound pessimistic about humans being on staff, but 5% of staff going away is what a CEO wants to do in general.
That's a good point, too. A lot of this 5% of staff going away would have happened anyway.
Yeah. It's like, where do we cut costs?
Yeah.
How do we cut corners? I think this is, I guess, overall kind of a positive story for anybody who's like, these models, what are the humans going to do? Just twiddle our thumbs all day? No, we're not there yet. We might have a different conversation in 5 years from now. Before we talk about how you do it, here's a sample of how it works for your audience.
I want to just be upfront and say, are you using us to try to sell gaming PCs to your TikTok audience?
Oh, get real, old bros. I'm here to share my journey and have some fun with you guys. But hey, I won't deny that part of being an influencer is about sharing stuff I love and believe in.
Oh, right.
Like the CLX gaming PC isn't just a product. It's part of my everyday life. It's like when you find something super cool, you just want to tell everyone about it.
I mean, it looks pretty lifelike. The audio maybe isn't there yet, but
I can tell which two are the
far.
humans, though.
Yeah, it's good. Thank God.
Right.
Thank God. I'm happy that's the case. All of the text back and forth we do through ChatGPT. So in a raw version of our podcast, there's a lot of stuff we're editing down, but we'll ask a question, we'll type it in, and then we use a program called 11 Labs. So if you're familiar with 11 Labs, it is a speech to text generation. It's kind of become the one that is out there. We take the voice, and there's another program that's called D-ID, which is what we use to animate the face. Yeah. Upload the photo from Midjourney, upload the audio, and then it kicks out a file that looks like that influencer, right? And then it's the television / media magic of editing it down and making it so that it fits.
Are you doing text to speech, speech to text, or is it just you saying it and then chatting it and you re-perform it later? How does the actual performance of the interaction work?
We are trying to, on the podcast, keep it organic as possible. So it's probably like, we'll get an answer from ChatGPT, we'll put it into 11 Labs, and it'll take like 10 seconds to come back, maybe a little less sometimes. So it's still fast. It's just not instant.
Okay. But you're reacting to that.
Yes.
Then.
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
And then magic of editing, removing the pauses and everything. That's cool.
The more realistic it is, the better, which means you have to leave the ums and ahs in. And also the weirder it is, the better for us. So we turn up, there's a little slider on 11 Labs that lets you turn up the, like essentially the weirdness factor. So you get all these like inflections in weird ways something talks. And I think that makes it more fun as well.
All right, let's get into this Taylor Swift thing. 404 Media says that deepfakes, images and videos of Taylor Swift that took over X originated on Telegram. Some of those images went viral on X. The platform seemed a little slow to catch up, and one post in particular was seen more than 47 million times before it was taken down. X says it has removed almost all of the posts now and the associated accounts, and it is continuing to monitor.
Congress in the U.S. taking advantage of this, calling attention to the Preventing Deepfakes of Intimate Images Act. Congressman Tom Keene Jr. said, whether the victim is Taylor Swift or any young person across our country, we need to establish safeguards to combat this alarming trend.
Personally, I'm angry for her because I know how it feels to have somebody create that, which can hurt your reputation and it can hurt your credibility with your fans or your viewers or whoever is out there.
Yeah.
But given that it is getting easier and easier, like that's something that I've thought about just as a content creator. Like when it happens, it's not really like if it happens, but when does it happen? And will it happen at a time that there's some kind of regulations involved to protect me as a public facing figure?
All right, question 7. What was the name of the catalog-based product line that Apple created in 1986 to sell Apple-branded merchandise, especially a large selection of fashionable apparel that featured Apple logos and included a collection of clothes for kids?
I'm going to use this person. They put in the looks Twitch chat, Apple Store.
Oh, you're getting close. It's not Apple Store, but now you're getting warmer. Clinton
Mac
said
Store.
Apple Shop. It's not Mac.
I'm stealing somebody else from Twitch. Apple Orchard.
No.
Orchard is a great name.
It's a collection of Apple products.
Oh, the Apple collection.
Thank you.
Wow. Look at those shorts.
Fashionable.
I want the hat.
And that's just one page. It had multiple pages.
Yo, I'm going to be honest. I think this is fashionable.
That's coming back.
They actually sold an Apple Watch.
All styling it up there. Wow.
They had a Swiss Army
So many
knife.
layers.
Swiss Army
so many
knife.
layers.
We're kind of in the habit of thinking of YouTube as like a video platform. And then there's Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, or a social platform. I think the new group is content creation, video oriented platform. I don't know what to call it, but it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. And they all have a more similar feature set with each other than they do with outside or other social networks and platforms.
I still, because I'm old school, I still just like a good old fashioned photo, or maybe a photo carousel. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do video right now. I don't have time for this.
It's hard when you are old school, when you've spent decades as we have, you start to get used to like, no, this is how social media works. You have your text, you have your short message apps, you have your long message apps, you have your photo app, and you have your video thing. You have YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, right? That's how we were raised, right? Like that's how it's supposed to look. And what I'm trying to point out and what I'm trying to conceive of and get myself out of the habit by doing it is that's not how it's being used. There are multiple short messaging blogs, microblogs, whatever you want to call them out there. And it's kind of a big question of how many can and should be supported, how many people really want that. But that is now entirely separate from Facebook, which is just, I don't even know what it is except a place with billions of people. It's sort of a family communication app at this point. Like that's what I usually hear is like, yeah, but that's where I share my baby photos. So that's where I keep in touch with my relatives. And then these four apps, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram I'm recognizing are more like each other. Like I YouTube and Instagram, I wouldn't have put them in the same class 10 years ago. They're in the same class. I've been wondering what happens when companies run out of data to train new models on. While there is a lot of data created every day, we're creating some right now by recording this podcast. They've almost caught up to using all of the usable data to train on. So the need for high quality text data is, by various estimates, thought to outstrip supply for training purposes within the next 2 years to maybe 5 years, depending on who you ask.
Nobody serious would look at where we are right now and not say this is going to be a part of our technological landscape. We can differ on whether or not it's going to totally reshape it, or it's just going to be something that is a back end boon and a party trick, but nobody can seriously say that it's not going to be there. So that means that with a lot of money floating around, now everybody knows, whoa. What we thought was extraordinarily cheap, the data we put out onto the internet, now the price is going up. I have heard that there have been very, very promising synthetic data examples. Now, this is just gossip around the
synthetic data being the training on data created by other models. Yeah.
I think that we are going to, in the next year, hear less of the hardy har machines can't make the things that trained the machines, and more, oh my God, the machines can make things that can train the machines.
It's possible. I have heard more of a mix of pessimism and optimism on that. And it's usually the two sides talking to each other, and I'm standing on the sidelines watching them call each other names.
Yeah.
But it's sort of, like, yeah, but if we do this, then that would fix it. And then the other side saying, yeah, that's not going to work. It's impossible to say who's right, because when something's promising, that means it still has to be proven. And until you prove it, it hasn't worked. But as soon as you prove it, hey, guess what? It worked.
But man, isn't this like the best? Isn't this actually what we like talking about technology? Like I have been of the opinion that we are finally coming out of a true dark ages of tech conversations, that the more we are talking about lawsuits and patents and the business of it, the less we are getting to what we really, really love, which is this. Can machines train machines? I believe you can do it.
Is there a way to do it?
You need to use these things. No, you're wrong. You need to use these other things. These are the technological breakthroughs that are going to shape our world, and it's so fun to be able to watch it.
All right, as I mentioned, Saturday, the U.S. president signed a reauthorization of Section 702 of FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It lets the U.S. collect communications of non-U.S. citizens located outside the country without a warrant, just need the FISA court to sign off, for a national security purpose. This received zero attention in the tech press. They also expanded it to include data centers. Justin, why were this and the TikTok bill so lightly covered?
We've focused a lot on kind of soft tech issues of sociological questions of what social media is doing to us, whether or not we are manipulated by misinformation. And not to say that these aren't worthwhile pursuits, but they're the most popular pursuits right now. And that means that there's not somebody in there saying, hey, here's your data center explainer. Here's, let alone doing the next level stuff of, we've issued the following FOIA requests and we now can report exclusively that this many people were, spied on. This many Americans in America were spied on without a warrant, using this program. We're still relying on self-reported data from inside the intelligence communities. So,
yeah, and maybe you need the sensational 24-hour entertainment that is calling itself news coverage to drive the conversation enough to make the more sober Ars Technicas and Verges of the world cover it. But also they covered it without having to do big, deep explainers the other times it was up for reauthorization. So part of me was like, well, maybe they just know people are tired of it. People are like, yeah, it's going to get reauthorized. It always does.
It's disappointing to me because tech journalism at its best is helping us understand a world that is only getting more complicated. And that's kind of always been it, that there's always a sliding scale of tomorrow's going to be more complicated than today. We'll help you understand it. We'll help you explain it. It's part of the ethos of this show as a more analysis driven program is let's bring context so this doesn't slap you like, from out of nowhere. A million outlets and Substacks that we have. There was at least none that me and you follow that just said, nope, whole hog on this. In a way that we did see with FISA reauthorization in maybe a critical mass of tech press in the past, that we did see with PIPA and SOPA and other
SOPA, PIPA, yeah.
And other stuff like that. We did see this happen.
And that is one thing I've noticed more and more creeping into more and more of the respected sources. Forget the clickbaity ones that are in the hundreds and thousands. Of the respected sources, I've noticed more like, oh, well, obviously this villain wants to do this horrible thing. And let me tell you about this. And I find that harder and harder to push against. And it's disappointing. Not to mention, SOPA's back. The Stop Online Piracy Act, the Motion Picture Association is bringing it back. They dusted it off, and they have just started the campaign. So I haven't covered it a lot yet, but they're going to try to give it another run. They're like, hey, if FISA can do it, we can do it.
We can do it too.
How TikTok is wiring Gen Z's money brain. Endless videos about the economy and consumerism are giving 20-somethings a case of money dysmorphia. Objectively, when you look at the stats, Gen Z is doing very well for this stage in development. When you compare them to millennials and boomers, and everybody forgets Gen X, but them too.
Whatever, man.
Yeah. So why is Gen Z feeling like they're not doing well? They say when they talk to people is, I see all these people on TikTok and they're pressuring me. I feel pressured to keep up. It's the keep up with the Joneses mentality. I need that cool bag. I need that fun vacation. But I'm also being told by that same TikTok, you'll never be able to afford a house. You're living in the worst economy of all time.
Yeah.
And so they internalize both of these things of like, I need to make more money so I can live this better life, but I can't because the economy is bad.
If you wanted a sober-minded look at the economy, there were financial magazines and newspapers that laid stuff out. If you wanted more radical thought and dangerous ideas and ads for head shops, you could pick up the Alt Weekly. Now we have a very, very, very nichified media world, and yet TikTok has kind of become this catch-all for everybody. So you are not only getting radical political thought, you are also getting very sober-minded money advice, and you are getting a testimonial from somebody that is essentially kind of the modern day replacement of a biography about somebody living an interesting life. So I'm not surprised that Gen Z would have a confused wait what kind of reaction to it, but also I don't know how much clarity Gen Z should have on their lives. I mean, if I'm only going to judge my life as a sign, just hold on loosely until you're about 27, and then you're going to start thinking about things in a different way.
Median wealth for those born in the 90s has quadrupled to more than $40,000 between 2019 and 2022, and outpaces the growth rate for all previous generations at that age. You have more money. Even adjusted for inflation, you, Gen Z, are making more money. And all this shows me is, yes, the amount of money you have as a person in their 20s has no bearing on changing how you feel when you're in your 20s and are suddenly having to make your way on your own. And it's frightening. I remember it's incredibly frightening.
Specifically, the economic sense of we are being railroaded by insert sinister forces here. And something that was precious, it has been long since taken away, and we are the generation left holding the bag, is something that is very, very present. Political Orphanage just did a big episode about the 50s. And specifically laying out, was America better in the 50s, and how much would your dollar spread? Spoiler alert, the 50s were a second world country compared to what we get to live in today. Our money does spread farther, and what we get for our money is extraordinarily more valuable. So while we have had persistent inflation, and we can have a conversation about how bad that is long term, there's no doubt that our money goes further. We live infinitely better lives than those in the 50s.
Andrew recently wrote a piece published on Reason.com called "In the AI Economy, There Will Be 0% Unemployment."
I am sure when people looked at mechanical plows, when 95% of the population was involved, not just in agriculture, but working on farms, may have looked at that and said, well, shucks, what are we going to do now? Because our job is, to plow fields. And now we've got these machines doing them. So my thesis, which is not a radical one, is that as you have this economic growth, you're going to have a greater demand for labor because of it. And there will never be enough robots or AI or people to satisfy that demand. As the economy grows and you're going to need more of everything, that's going to include people. And so I think that we're going to have radical unemployment. We could be in a world where the average child in the global South could be going to school on a campus nicer than Stanford. That is a reality with robotics. That is a reality with an AI future where you drive down the cost of these things so low. And I think that people often don't think about that. They just think about I'm just going to replace the person at McDonald's with this. Well, yes, and you're going to have other services and stuff we didn't imagine. And an example I used is if I showed the first photograph to somebody in 1837, which was the first photograph of a person taken accidentally when a camera was aimed at a street and left open for a long exposure, they might be worried about the artist. Like, what's going to happen to the portrait artist? Here's this thing, this machine, this camera that can now replicate what an artist can do. Well, it turned out that, art is something that an average person would pay to put in their home didn't even exist then. Now it is actually a much bigger commercial industry than ever has been. But if I tried to explain them, not only would that be a reality, but in the next century, you would have somebody like a director like James Cameron directing an army of people equal to 1/3 the size of the United States standing army at that time, with a budget equal to the entire United States military budget in 1837, and with a box office gross greater than what the GNP was going to be at that point. I'd seem like a crazy person, let alone trying to explain the blue people and everything else in Avatar. But that's the reality. And if we think that our future is going to be just where we are today, but maybe with neon colored things and funny hats, that's not been the case ever. The future is so much bigger than we can imagine.
2 of Amanda Silberling's friends are no longer with her. If Facebook keeps reminding her to wish them happy birthday, and they kind of died, their birthdays were near each other, and so she's always getting them together, and it's just kind of weird. She touches on the idea of whose responsibility is your data after you're gone. There isn't a single policy. You have to know for every single thing you have data in what you need to do to make sure your family can access it after it. And as we have been on the internet now for, 30 plus years, there are lots more things than there used to be. Lots more pieces of data kicking around out there.
I would love to be able to do a digital will or something.
Yeah.
If I died tomorrow, I've not done a good job of anybody in my family really knowing all the places I'm logged in or would log in or have content that would either notify people Facebook wise or otherwise. I've done a terrible job of that. We also need middleware to help us things like 1Password, things
right.
like LastPass.
GPEG says, why not just do a period of inactivity act where if the accuser doesn't, if the user, I think there's just a autocorrect there, where if the user doesn't log into an account for a period of time after being
I
notified,
accuse you of dying.
where if the user doesn't log into an account for a period of time after being notified, it's deleted. It's like a safety
What
net.
would that period of time be?
Yeah, that's always the question, right?
Is it 5 years?
Well, you could say that every person gets to set it, but some people aren't going to set it. So yeah, what's the default? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? Is it 2 years?
Yeah.
I think it could be a couple of years, but not everybody's going to want their data deleted.
When I was,
as Kelly's like, just what a company would want. Users that want their data kept, but that user being gone and not paying for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't monetize that. I guess you could put ads for funeral homes on their account or something.
Yeah, that does get into
but
sort of
again,
the gray area of,
I know this horse is not long for this world, and I'm so sorry to look as if perhaps I'm about to beat it, but Solid would take care of it. Early Friday, starting in Australia, Windows computers at large companies began seeing the old blue screen of death and were unable to reboot. That outage spread as the sun came up in Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The blue screens were caused by a faulty update to CrowdStrike's Falcon sensor. It caused servers and client computers at large enterprises to go down. And because CrowdStrike is very popular and used in a lot of places, affected airports. It affected airlines, causing planes to be grounded. In fact, the US FAA did a ground stop at one point just to sort out the chaos caused by the outage. It also affected banks, hospitals, transport services, media. Sky Media went off the air briefly. Several other broadcasters went off the air briefly. Shops had to close. Starbucks. Technomensch asks a question I think a lot of people have. If this could happen with a single update, what happens if we really get attacked? I think this is pretty good example of how resilient we are. We were able to put a patch out. Most of the systems have come back online. Things are starting to move again. Planes are moving again. We're not still talking about people being stuck in airports other than, like, oh, you got delayed, so you're still waiting to get on the next flight. But the planes are in the air. London cabbies are back on the road. Starbucks can open back up, etc. That doesn't mean that if you're in an enterprise where you're like still trying to get that BitLocker key, it's not super frustrating, but this could have been worse. Cliff said the posting, the deepfake posting, quote, really conjured up my fears around AI and the dangers of spreading misinformation. I think a lot of people think they're videos. They're not. They are pretty clearly created by a generative model. Most of them just show fans wearing shirts supporting one of the candidates. There is one that shows Taylor dressed up as Uncle Sam that is very clearly a generated model. And it just has text that says, Taylor wants you to vote for this candidate. These digital images are not convincing.
No,
I don't think anyone
terrible.
was fooled, right?
Well, see, I've been saying that for a couple of years now.
That's maybe a lot of people get fooled by a lot of things, but yes, I'm with you on this.
You can fool some of the people some of the time. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
My mom has no, just to use an example, she's 86. She has no filter for this. She doesn't understand that any of those images or any obviously to me faked AI images are fake. To her, they just like, well, these look like photos. What's the problem? She really doesn't see it the way I see it.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that it's easy to go, well, clearly that's fake. Like it doesn't take me, I don't even have to look for multiple fingers. I can just see it. It's just something there. I've been trained to see it. So
Taylor gives 3 thumbs up on one hand.
Yeah. Sometimes regulation comes out of this where we start to say, well, what do we actually want to do when it comes to my face or my world or my job or whatever it is, and somebody taking it, or, as an artist, this has been a question for a couple of years now. What does it mean if somebody takes your style, makes stuff on it, they make money on it, you get nothing? Like, what do we want to do as a society about that? Is it a problem? Is it a bigger problem than I think it is? Vice versa. And I think that's good that the conversation can happen with somebody who's extremely
It does elevate it, right? Yeah.
Right.
It makes
Right.
more people think about it and talk about it, including us right now. So.
Even if it goes nowhere quickly,
Yeah.
it does seem like at least a start to the conversation, because at some point we're going to have it.
how a newspaper revolution sparked protesters and influencers, disinformation, and the Civil War. In the mid-1800s, we were having an information explosion. The number of papers in 1800 was a handful in the United States. And remember, when we're talking about the United States in the year 1800, we're really talking about the Eastern Seaboard. By 1860, there were 4,000.
Wow.
And by 1860, you've got a bigger country, certainly, but that's a big increase. And there was no journalistic integrity. There was no journalism is about fairness and balance. They published scandals. They published rumors. They riled up mobs. They attacked each other's editors. They were directly affiliated with political parties. 95% of newspapers in the 1860s were explicit in their political affiliation. The effect was, tell me if this sounds familiar, Nika, news went from being a local affair where you were concerned with your local events to a national affair where you were more concerned with your national events.
Oh my gosh, I never heard of that before.
It's a weird world they had in the 1800s. There were a lot of young people reading the newspaper. We think of the newspaper as like, oh, that's what grandpa does, right? He reads the newspaper. Back then, the newspaper was this hot new media. So it was the young people who used it. It was the young people who wrote it. And you had influencers rise up around the newspapers. One of the... Yeah, right. One of the big groups was called the Wide Awakes. Present tense, not woke, but wide awake.
Not past tense, but they were current.
Within months of their founding, young Republicans were forming clubs from Connecticut to California to put pressure on Democratic papers in their cities. This historian is not trying to say the rise of newspapers caused the Civil War, but he is pointing out that it definitely contributed to the ability to increase tensions and increase awareness and increase conflict. And he says, what began in ink spiraled into lead and steel. It took 16 years to develop from the introduction of the telegraph to the Civil War. Undoubtedly, the fight over slavery caused that conflict, but the newspapers fed it, amplified it, and exaggerated it. Mid-19th century Americans lived with an odd combination, an unprecedented ability to spread information, but also a siloed and partisan system of interpreting it. It helped the nation finally reckon with the crimes of slavery, but also spread bad faith, irrational panic, and outright lies. One of the highest levels of consolidation starts to happen in the 50s, and that's when you start to get these ideas of journalistic integrity and being balanced and not injecting yourself into the story. Whereas in the 1860s, when you have the widest playing ground with the most number of voices, you have none of that. You have nobody talking about journalistic integrity. Everybody just wants to read the paper that reflects the way they feel.
Do you think there's a line where people just kind of move from normal skepticism about your product can do A, B, or C and just sort of just fall straight into the pessimistic side? Or do you think people just start out with that viewpoint?
We went through a tremendous world of tech optimism, right? Compare the ideas of or the attitudes of the 90s and the 2000s, where it was an insurgent idea to say the internet is going to revolutionize everything. Like, let's hold up Katie Couric laughing about what is the internet as the sign of the deposed regime. We, the internet, have risen up, and indeed we won the day. But the problem is that, like all revolutions, the revolutionaries start eating themselves very quickly. And so instead of just saying, yeah, the internet did revolutionize everything, let's think about what else we can do with it, the idea became, let's hyperfixate on all the problems that are still around or have been new problems that have been created by the internet. Let's ignore the fact that we solved a whole lot of problems, and let's talk about how the internet ruined the world.
There is a lot of similarity to what you're talking about and tech journalism in the 90s, where it was, listen, Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Microsoft's a decent company. Apple's never going anywhere. And this internet thing is overblown. It really is never going to fulfill on its promise. People are wasting money on these .coms for some reason with these megalomaniacs who think they can, change the world. The difference is now not only are tech companies the biggest 7 companies in the world, but also everyone uses technology. Everyone has a supercomputer in their pocket now, for the most part. And the majority of the world has a smartphone of some kind, even if it's a mid-range, right? It's still an incredibly powerful device. And so more people have an opinion. The tech companies are bigger, so it's a bigger conversation. Hey, big thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon. We could not do it without you. No live shows this holiday week. Back with live shows January 2nd, 4 p.m. Eastern, dailytechnewsshow.com/live. Our holiday programming continues Monday with the 2024 Tech Predictions Results Show. Talk to you then. This week's episodes of Daily Tech News Show were created by the following people. Host, producer, and writer Tom Merritt. Host, producer, and writer Sarah Lane. Executive producer and booker Roger Chang. Producer, writer, and co-host Rob Dunwood. Video producer Joe Kuntz. Producer at large Anthony Lemos. Spanish language host, writer, and producer Dan Campos. Science correspondent Dr. Nikki Ackermans. Social media producer and moderator Zoe Detterding. Our mods, Beatmaster, W. Scottus One, BioCow, Captain Kipper, Steve Guadarrama, Paul Reese, Matthew J. Stevens, aka Gadget Virtuoso, and JD Galloway. Mod and video hosting by Dan Christensen. Music and art provided by Martin Bell, Dan Luters, Mustafa A, Acast, and Len Peralta. Acast ad support from Tatiana Matias. Patreon support from Tom McNeil. Contributors to this week's show included Chris Christensen, and our guests this week were Mark Bussell Jr., Andrew Zakis, Todd Belcher, Gary Fisher, Howard Yermish, and Brian Brushwood. And thanks to all the patrons who make the show possible.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.